The sun climbed slowly over the red earth, lighting roofs of rusted zinc and paths worn smooth by years of bare feet and silent prayers. Ebony woke before the rooster, as she always did, her bones already tired from yesterday's labor and her mind heavy with the quiet fear of another day that might yield nothing. She knelt beside her mat and pressed her forehead to the ground, whispering words her mother had taught her long ago, words of trust, words of patience, words meant to steady her heart when hunger waited outside like an old acquaintance. Around her, the world stretched awake, unaware of her small struggle, unaware of how close hope sometimes felt and how quickly it slipped away. Her husband, Kola, rose after her, his eyes clouded with thoughts he rarely spoke aloud. He was a man known for his strength and honesty, yet those qualities had not shielded him from loss. The farm he inherited no longer yielded as it once did, and each season seemed to mock his effort with poor harvest and broken tools. Still, he greeted the morning with a straight back, believing that dignity was something no misfortune could steal. What neither of them knew was that this very morning, so ordinary and burdened, was already trembling with unseen purpose. Beyond the dusty paths and tangled farms lived Otumba Bemisola, a man whose name traveled faster than his footsteps. Some spoke of his wealth in hushed admiration, others with envy sharp enough to cut friendship in half. His compound stood tall, guarded by carved wooden gates and stories no one could fully explain. Cows filled his fields, servants filled his courtyards, and yet peace did not always fill his nights. Wealth had found him early and stayed, but joy came and went like a shy visitor who never unpacked his bags. People said Bemisola had been blessed by forces beyond understanding, while others insisted he had paid a price too terrible to name. Children dared each other to run past his gate at night, claiming the walls whispered secrets when the moon was full. Bemisola himself ignored such talk, focusing instead on expanding his holdings and silencing his doubts with gold and authority. He had everything he once prayed for, yet something within him remained unsettled, like a drumbeat that refused to fall into rhythm. Kola worked his field until his palms blistered, pushing the hoe through stubborn soil that seemed to resist every movement. Sweat rolled down his face and fell into the ground, darkening the dust for only a moment before vanishing. He paused to breathe, leaning on the handle as frustration rose in his chest. Then, without warning, his tool struck something solid, not stone, not root, but something hollow and resonant. The sound startled him, echoing faintly as though the earth itself had answered his effort. He knelt and dug with his hands, uncovering a small clay pot sealed with wax and wrapped in faded cloth. His heart raced as curiosity battled caution, and for a moment he considered burying it back where it came from. Stories of buried curses and restless spirits crowded his thoughts. But another voice, quiet, steady, almost comforting, urged him forward. With trembling fingers, he lifted the pot, unaware that this simple act had just shifted the direction of his life. When Kola opened the pot at home, the room filled with a glow that made Ebony gasp and step back. Inside lay old cowries and gold dust, untouched by time, shimmering with an unsettling beauty. The air seemed heavier, charged with something neither of them could name. Joy surged first, raw and powerful, followed closely by fear. They stared at the treasure as if it might suddenly speak or disappear, uncertain whether to laugh, cry, or run. That night, sleep refused to come. Every sound outside felt like approaching footsteps, every shadow a watching eye. Ebony clutched her husband's arm, whispering prayers between shallow breaths, while Kola lay awake questioning the source of their sudden fortune. Was this the reward of years of faith, or a test disguised as blessing? Neither dared to use a single cowrie, sensing that the wealth demanded more than gratitude, it demanded understanding. At dawn, they saw the oldest man in the land, Baba Ajodi, whose words were said to weigh more than iron. Beneath the towering Iroko tree, he listened without interruption, his cloudy eyes sharp with hidden insight. When they finished, silence settled thick and expectant. Birds paused mid-song as if waiting for his judgment. Finally, Baba Ajodi spoke, his voice slow and deliberate, warning them that not all riches came with peace, and not all blessings reveal their cost at once. He instructed them to give thanks openly and secretly, to share before they stored, and to remember that true blessing never enslaved its owner. His final words lingered like smoke: what God gives freely does not demand blood or fear in return. Kola and Ebony left with more questions than answers, yet their hearts felt lighter, anchored by wisdom that pointed toward generosity rather than greed. Their first act was simple but bold. They fed the hungry who gathered daily near the market, offering food without announcement or pride. Word spread quickly, carried by grateful mouths and curious eyes. Some praised them, others suspected hidden motives, but the couple remained unmoved. Each gift felt like a stone removed from a growing burden they hadn't realized they were carrying. With every act of kindness, something strange happened. The fear surrounding the treasure weakened. Nights grew quieter, sleep returned, and laughter found its way back into their home. The wealth did not diminish, instead, it seemed to multiply in ways that defied counting. It was as if generosity had unlocked a flow that hoarding never could. News of Kola's sudden rise reached Bemisola through traders and gossipers who added spice to every detail. The powerful man listened with narrowed eyes, irritation gnawing at him. How could a man he once overlooked now command respect without struggle or sacrifice? The idea unsettled him, awakening an old hunger he thought wealth had silenced. Driven by pride and suspicion, Bemisola ordered his servants to investigate. He wanted to know the source of Kola's fortune, certain that some secret ritual or hidden alliance lay behind it. They thought that simple faith and obedience could produce such abundance felt like an insult to everything he believed about power. When Bemisola finally visited Kola's home, his smile was polished and his words smooth. He praised their prosperity, offered gifts, and spoke of partnership, masking his true intentions beneath courtesy. Kola welcomed him respectfully, unaware of the storm of motives standing before him. Ebony watched quietly, sensing tension beneath the surface calm. As they spoke, Bemisola studied every corner, every gesture, searching for clues. Yet what he found confused him. There were no charms, no altars, no signs of forbidden dealings. Only gratitude, humility, and a steady peace he could not buy. The visit ended without answers, leaving Bemisola more troubled than before. Unwilling to accept mystery, Bemisola turned inward, desperate to recreate what he had witnessed. He gave publicly, but his heart remained clenched. He shared, but only to be seen. Each act felt forced, hollow, driven by fear of missing out rather than love. The more he tried, the more restless he became. Soon, cracks appeared in his wealth. Cattle fell ill, deals collapsed, and trusted servants betrayed him. The abundance he once took for granted began slipping through his fingers like dry sand. In his desperation, he realized too late that he had misunderstood the source of true blessing. One night, flames tore through Bemisola's storehouse, devouring years of accumulation in a roar that echoed across the land. People watched in stunned silence as wealth turned to ash, unable to be rescued by authority or force. Bemisola stood apart, his face illuminated by the fire, finally stripped of the illusion that riches alone could secure him. As smoke rose into the sky, he remembered words he once mocked about blessings that came without sorrow. For the first time, humility replaced anger, and a painful clarity settled in his chest. The fire did not only consume his goods, it burned away his pride. Broken and weary, Bemisola sought Baba Ajodi, approaching the Iroko tree without escorts or arrogance. His confession spilled freely, heavy with regret and confusion. The old man listened again, as he always did, reminding him that God's blessing was not a reward for cleverness, but a response to surrender. Bemisola wept openly, shedding years of false strength. He left not with promises of restored wealth, but with something rarer, a softened heart willing to learn. The journey ahead would be slow, but it would be real. Meanwhile, Kola's prosperity faced its own trial. A drought threatened crops across the land, and many watched closely to see if his fortune would finally fail. Instead of panic, he opened his stores, sharing grain freely even as uncertainty loomed. Some called him foolish, others saw faith in motion. When rain finally fell, it was heavier over his fields than anywhere else. People whispered again, but this time with reverence rather than suspicion. The blessing proved resilient, untouched by fear, strengthened by trust. Bemisola returned, not as a rival, but as a student. He apologized without excuses, acknowledging his envy and mistakes. Kola received him warmly, recognizing humility as a greater victory than triumph. Their conversation stretched long into the evening, marked by honesty rather than competition. For the first time, Bemisola felt peace settle quietly within him. No applause followed, no immediate reward, yet his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He understood now that blessing was not something to seize, but something to receive. When the season turned and the harmattan wind softened, Kola stood before the elders and made a choice that surprised many. Instead of expanding only his own lands, he dedicated a large portion of his wealth to works that would never return profit to his pocket. Wells were dug where women once walked half a day for water, and grain houses were built for times of hunger, their doors never locked. Some warned him that generosity had limits, that a man who gave too much would one day stand with empty hands again. Kola listened respectfully, but his heart was already settled. Abani worked beside him, organizing women and teaching children whose laughter now filled spaces once ruled by silence. Each project seemed to invite more favor rather than loss. The wealth did not shrink, it expanded quietly, like roots growing underground. People began to understand that what sustained Kola was not strategy or reputation, but alignment with something higher, something that turned service into strength and giving into security. As years passed, grace touched Kola's beard and wisdom softened his voice. Children who once ate from his generosity now returned as young adults, offering their skills freely to the land that raised them. They spoke of him not as a rich man, but as a righteous one, a title that carried greater weight. Abani often sat beneath the Iroko tree with the young girls, reminding them that dignity was a treasure no one could steal. Bemisola, changed by loss and humility, became a quiet pillar of counsel. He no longer sought admiration, only usefulness. In helping others avoid the mistakes that once consumed him, he discovered a peace deeper than any luxury he had known. His story became a warning and a hope, told carefully so pride would not twist its meaning. Those who once watched Kola with narrowed eyes found no scandal to cling to. Rumors faded when years passed without contradiction. Envy, starved of evidence, lost its voice. Even distant lands heard of prosperity that did not corrupt and power that did not oppress, and emissaries came seeking insight rather than advantage. The land responded in kind. Harvest arrived on time, rains fell in measured mercy, and sickness passed lightly through households that once feared it. Songs were sung at festivals, not of gold or cattle, but of faithfulness rewarded. The blessing had become visible, undeniable, yet never boastful. Late one season, a traveling merchant arrived with promises dressed in elegance. He offered Kola a partnership that would multiply his wealth beyond counting, but the terms required quiet injustice, small at first, then growing. The proposal lingered in the air like smoke, tempting in its ease. That night, Kola felt the familiar pressure of choice, the kind that reveals a man to himself. He prayed, not for increase, but for clarity. By morning, the answer was firm. He refused the offer without anger or pride, choosing peace over expansion. The merchant left unimpressed, unaware that he had just witnessed the difference between riches and blessing. What Kola protected that day could not be measured in coin. A great gathering followed at the close of the year, drums calling people from far and near. Under a full moon, elders retold the journey of empty hands, faithful nights, generous choices, and enduring favor. Children leaned forward, absorbing truths older than the drums themselves. The night carried a reverence that needed no instruction. Kola and Abane sat among the people, indistinguishable from the crowd except for the quiet respect that surrounded them. They understood then that their lives had become a living lesson, a story that no longer belonged only to them. The blessing had found a voice through community. Time moved gently, leaving marks but not wounds. Prosperity remained steady, never frantic, never anxious. Visitors still came asking for secrets, expecting rituals or formulas. They left with simpler answers than they desired: faith, obedience, humility, generosity. Some accepted it. Others walked away disappointed. But the truth remained unchanged. God's favor spoke not through sudden miracles alone, but through consistency unmarred by sorrow. It proved itself in peace during loss, courage during temptation, and gratitude during abundance. On an evening softened by sunset, Kola walked the land one last time, listening to the sounds of life his choices had helped sustain. He felt no fear of tomorrow, no hunger for more. He understood now that wealth was never the destination, it was the assignment. And so the story endured, carried from firelight to firelight, from generation to generation, that the blessing of God makes rich, and adds no sorrow with it. For it builds without destroying, gives without enslaving, and leaves behind a legacy no time, flame, or envy can erase.